Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into the incredibly intriguing and honestly pretty unsettling world of classified government research. Look, we all know the classic Hollywood trope, right? The dark labs, mysterious scientists, hidden underground bunkers, and those thick folders stamped top secret. But what we're going to explore today is how the reality of actual secret government experiments, well, it's often way stranger, and sometimes a whole lot darker than any science fiction script. So on one hand, you've got the pop culture imagination on the left, alien bases and mad scientists. But verified history tells a totally different story. Real history gives us things like Project MKUltra and the Manhattan Project. Throughout history, governments have absolutely run operations hidden completely from the public eye. Now, to be fair, these projects were fundamentally designed to protect national security, but in the process, they frequently push the extreme limits of science, medicine, and human behavior. And that brings us to the central question of our explainer today. What actually happens when governments operate entirely in the dark? When operations are just buried deep inside locked archives and hidden military facilities, how does a nation balance the necessary secrecy for its defense with the potential loss of ethical accountability? Keep that exact question in mind as we walk through the historical record. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Cold War's Shadows, Paranoia and Secrecy. So, the mid-20th century, it was pretty much defined by this intense, suffocating paranoia. Stepping back to 1945, the fear of enemy mind control set in really fast. The United States was terrified that enemy nations were developing advanced psychological techniques. Intelligence agencies literally worried that prisoners of war or captured spies could be brainwashed into revealing critical state secrets. So in response, the CIA launched a covert operation in the 1950s, Project MKUltra, specifically to explore methods of controlling the human mind. It wasn't until investigations in the 1970s that thousands of these secret documents were finally exposed to the public. The reality of MKUltra is just chilling. Scientists secretly tested drugs like LSD, and while sure some subjects volunteered, a lot of unsuspecting people had absolutely no idea they were part of an experiment. And these tests didn't just happen in isolated military bunkers. They took place in everyday hospitals, universities, and hidden safe houses. The goal was to study exactly how these chemicals affected memory, behavior, and decision-making. But the results were tragic. Victims reported terrifying hallucinations, severe mental breakdowns, and lifelong psychological trauma. But listen, this definitely wasn't just a Western phenomenon. Over on the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union was busy conducting its own highly classified experiments. Driven by the constant fear that conflict with the West could erupt into global nuclear war at any second, the Soviets invested heavily in secret weapons development. Rumors and reports from defectors pointed to hidden laboratories studying psychological warfare, biological weapons, and human endurance under unbearable stress. There were even programs reportedly exploring ways to create literal super soldiers capable of surviving harsh environments and resisting pain. In the shadow of all this massive global fear, scientific ethics were frequently just ignored by both sides. Moving on to Section 2, Testing on the Masses, Civilian Exposure. You see, these secret experiments weren't just limited to intelligence agencies and spies. Take a look at this sentiment right here. Citizens later felt betrayed after learning they had unknowingly participated in military testing. When everyday populations eventually discovered they had been used as unwitting test subjects to measure the effects of radiation, chemicals, or infectious diseases, it caused a profound breach of public trust. People started realizing that their governments sometimes prioritized strategic military advantage way above transparency and fundamental ethics. Let's actually look at some specific historical examples from our sources. During the early atomic age, as governments raced to develop more powerful weapons, massive nuclear bombs were detonated in deserts and on isolated islands. Astoundingly, soldiers were sometimes ordered to stand surprisingly close to these explosions just so scientists could study how the human body reacted to nuclear shockwaves and radiation. In another incredibly unsettling operation, researchers secretly released harmless bacteria into major cities. They wanted to study how biological warfare agents might spread through urban populations, desperate to understand city vulnerabilities. The tragic reality is the long-term health consequences of those tests. At the time, participants were not fully informed about the dangers. But years later, the fallout became undeniably clear. Countless veterans and participants reported cancer, severe illnesses, and birth defects in their families. And making matters so much worse, some governments flat out denied responsibility for decades before finally stepping up and acknowledging the severe risks that were actually involved.
All right, Section 3, Breakthroughs and Myths, the dual nature.
But operating in the shadows isn't exclusively about ethical abuses. History shows it's also led to world-altering technological breakthroughs. Take arguably the most impactful secret operation in history, the Manhattan Project. It started with a desperate military need during World War II. Then entire towns were literally built in secrecy to support the research. You had thousands of workers laboring day in and day out without having any idea what they were actually creating. And finally, the creation of the first atomic bomb in 1945. This completely changed the course of history, thrusting the world into the nuclear age. It proved to governments worldwide the immense, undeniable strategic power of classified scientific research. However, when you prove that secrecy is that powerful, you invite intense curiosity. Enter Area 51, out in the Nevada desert. It started as a highly classified military testing facility. Because of the absolute government's silence and refusal to even discuss operations there, public imagination just ran wild with endless UFO and alien conspiracy theories, extraterrestrial technology, you name it. But ultimately, it was declassified and revealed to be a testing base for advanced Cold War spy aircraft. So what you should really take away from this is a basic rule of human nature. Whenever governments hide information, speculation grows rapidly. It's like clockwork. When there is an information vacuum, the human imagination naturally and quickly fills it with myths, fears, and conspiracy theories. People begin imagining secret technologies or massive experiments far beyond public knowledge, simply because the door is locked. Which brings us to Section 4, the modern era, evolving fears. We've looked at the Cold War, but with the rapid technological advancements happening right now, the realities of classified operations have evolved significantly. We aren't just talking about nuclear shockwaves anymore. Today, citizens worry about hidden programs involving artificial intelligence that can analyze massive amounts of data to predict behavior or create hyper-realistic fake videos. There are major concerns about advanced surveillance systems, facial recognition, highly classified cybersecurity, satellite defense systems, and even genetic engineering. As technology becomes more powerful, the concerns about hidden programs operating beyond democratic oversight continue to grow. This leaves us in the middle of an ongoing, intense debate. On one hand, governments have strong arguments for why secrecy is kept. It protects against future cyber and biological threats, prevents enemies from gaining sensitive information during conflicts, and provides strategic advantages that genuinely save lives. On the other hand, the risks of that secrecy are severe. Unchecked secrecy leads to a total loss of democratic accountability. Without oversight, experiments can easily cross moral lines, which inevitably leads to deep public mistrust and suspicion when the truth eventually comes out. Well, the good news is that modern society has evolved to demand accountability. Today, informed consent is strictly required for medical testing in most democratic nations. There are robust international laws regulating chemical and biological weapons. Furthermore, independent researchers, investigative journalists, and whistleblowers play an absolutely crucial role in exposing hidden operations. And, perhaps most importantly, the internet and social media make it so much harder for governments to hide information forever. Leaks can spread globally in minutes to force transparency. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the provocative thought. We've explored the tension between world-altering technological power, the undeniable need for national security, and the very real human cost of secrecy. While many secrets from the past have been uncovered, the truth is most governments continue conducting classified research today. So we really have to ask, are the most frightening experiments the ones we still don't know about? History teaches us that whenever power operates in complete darkness, society must always ask questions. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's behind those